Australia's tropical cyclone season is about to get going in style towards the north of Darwin, but how bad is this system going to be for the Northern Territory? All of your questions answered in this weather update. Good morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ. We've got a developing tropical cyclone threat across northern Australia. This is going to be a bulk update on what we can be expecting with this tropical cyclone that is near Darwin. And if you are brand new to my channel, please do consider subscribing. But let's get stuck straight into things this morning with the situation over in the Northern Territory. So this is tropical low 02U, and it is developing along very, very nicely this morning. Obviously, that's not encouragement for this tropical cyclone, but it is moving along and it is really starting to get itself going here and could potentially be our first tropical cyclone of the 2025-26 Australian tropical cyclone season, and also our first potential significant tropical cyclone threat to the Australian mainland many months before these storms typically do start to become a threat. Now, if this does develop, it's going to pick up the name of FINA, F-I-N-A, so listen out for that one across the Northern Territory. However, that's not expected to happen until the end of this week, and the reason for that is that this system still has a ways to go in regards to organising. It looks very, very impressive right now, though. In fact, on the satellite imagery, you'd be mistaken if you woke up and thought that this was a tropical cyclone just by looking at the satellite imagery. I mean, we've got this defined centre of low pressure here, some inflow banding coming off here, and some outflow banding coming out to the backside of this storm here. It's a very, very organised system as it moves slowly up to the north in towards the north-northeast. Now, it is going to continue to develop over the next couple of days. In fact, we're expecting some pretty steady strengthening in the next 24 hours, 36 hours or so, and the forecast models are now taking this by the Northern Territory coastline down in towards the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf, generally speaking, and a potential cyclone impact on Darwin is definitely not out of the question at this point in time. Now, as we talked about in yesterday's forecast model, how these models initialize the storm, which is how they analyze the storm to be right now, is how well they're going to perform in the forecast. And the Eastern Reef, which has been performing pretty well over the last couple of days, has initialized this system as a broad, messy, low-pressure system, which means that it's analyzed the storm, it's taken all of the data that it can get from this tropical low, and it thinks, no, this just isn't it. It's not doing very well, and it's a broad area of low pressure. Now, that's bad for tropical cyclone intensity because it means that it's got a lot more in the way of organization to do. But what this means for the Eastern Reef forecast, which has taken it off in this direction here and then down by Darwin as a very weak cyclone, then into the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf by early next week as a very weak tropical cyclone, it means that we can pretty much throw this forecast out the window because it's not as reliable as other forecast models. In actual fact, it's flipped, and the GFS is now the one that we're going to be looking at because it is definitely the most reliable forecast model in terms of the historical standpoint, but it's also got this system here initialized as a center of low pressure, a very defined center of low pressure just offshore from the Tiwi Islands here, and it's doing a pretty good job at just taking this storm in and all of the data that we've got on this tropical cyclone and making a good forecast out of it. So let's see what the GFS has to say. As mentioned, that northerly track as this system continues to strengthen a little bit throughout the next 24 to 36 hours, getting north of the Northern Territory up to about 10 degrees south. Actually, it gets quite far up, actually about 8 degrees south. It really does get quite far up into the Arafura Sea, getting quite close to Indonesia before it makes that turn back on Wednesday night or into Thursday morning. It's going to be a very slow moving system, all things considered, and then crossing over the Tiwi Islands sometime on Saturday. Now, the GFS does generally underestimate in terms of wind speed, so we can safely say that this is likely to be a tropical cyclone at this point in time as it clips the Tiwi Islands and then heads down into the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf, where some pretty significant intensification does become possible. The GFS, as mentioned, is a massive low baller in terms of tropical cyclone intensity. Typically, it only estimates winds to about 30 or 40% of the extent that they are, which means as it passes by the Tiwi Islands here, if we've got wind speeds of about 50 kilometers an hour, it'd be pretty safe to assume that we've got 1 minute sustained winds in this tropical cyclone here approaching 110 or 120 kilometers an hour, and that would make it safely a category 1 strength tropical cyclone and probably close to a category 2 strength tropical cyclone. The track forecast is starting to become a little bit more known in regards to what this system is going to be doing over the next couple of days. As mentioned, that northeasterly track in the next few days is expected, and then by Wednesday or Thursday it's going to stall up here and then slowly make its turn back down to the Northern Territory. This is where things do get interesting. We've got a pretty big split of forecast models that take it out to the southwest, like the GFS, or down towards the south, like the Icon and the Eastern Reef forecast model, or out towards the east and over the top end of the Northern Territory in towards Kakadu, like the Access forecast model, which means basically our cone of uncertainty could be anywhere within this red line here, which makes predicting a landfall virtually impossible because it could be anywhere from Columbaroo in the northwestern corner of the Kimberley region of Western Australia, or it could be Darwin, it could be Wirrawai, or it could be over towards Nullarbor and Cape Wessel onto the eastern edge edge of the not the Cape York Peninsula, rather the Northern Territory top end. So really, really uncertain as to where this tropical cyclone is going to go. And to be honest, it's also quite uncertain as to how strong it's going to get. If it makes it out further west, say into the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf through here, it's going to get quite strong, likely category 2 or 3 strength tropical cyclone status. Now, if it has interaction with the Tiwi Islands, it's likely to remain a category 1 strength cyclone as it clips or passes over Darwin. And if it heads out further here, in fact, we've got some pretty unfavorable conditions, including a lot of dry air and upper level wind shear towards the east of this line here, which means we're likely to see either a tropical low or a very weak tropical cyclone, which is going to be very broad or messy in appearance. So again, we just don't know which option this tropical low is going to take at this point in time. It could be either one of them. I'm banking on either this option here close to Darwin or out towards the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf, but truth be told, I really don't know at this point in time, considering there is just so much uncertainty. Now, there's been a lot of uncertainty with this forecast the last couple of days. This storm has been an absolute nightmare to forecast, as tropical cyclones normally are. But the one thing that is guaranteed is, because this is a tropical-based weather system, tropical cyclone, there's going to be a lot of rainfall associated with it, and all major forecast models are suggesting the next 7 to 8 days are going to be extremely wet wherever this tropical low or tropical cyclone passes over. And again, it really does depend where this system does go. If it moves over the Tiwi Islands, which is very likely at this point in time, a boatload of rainfall is expected up there. All major forecast models are suggesting between 200 and 400 millimeters of the Tiwi Islands. In fact, a few forecast models are now getting closer to about 500 or 600 millimeters, including the Axis Convective forecast model, which is suggesting rainfall accumulations approaching 800 millimeters for a few spots. Now, this is quite a bullish forecast, but we have to keep in mind that we are talking about a tropical-based weather system once again, and a slow-moving tropical cyclone like this one, it's definitely not out of the realm of possibilities that half a meter of rainfall falls. It has happened before in November up into the Northern Territory, but it would result in most certainly some unprecedented flooding for a few locations, and it could definitely get its name into the history books if we were to see rainfall accumulations approaching 800 or 900 millimeters. I definitely reckon we're going to see a much more tame spread of rainfall. I do like the GFS's forecast right now, not only because it favours Darwin being spared from the worst of the rainfall, but we've got these more reasonable rainfall accumulations right now of around 100 millimeters, pushing close to about 300 millimeters where this tropical cyclone does track. Again, very much strongly dependent on where this system does go and who kind of sees the strongest winds and who kind of sees the landfall from this tropical cyclone. As you might be able to tell, wherever the low pressure centre does pass, which for the Eastern Weather Forecast model is somewhere along this track here, you can see that the bulk of the rainfall is just around that track, and that includes Darwin as well. It's going to be pretty concentrated rainfall. It's not a massive system, all things considered, and when it approaches the Australian coastline, it's also not going to be a massive system. You can see here from west to east, whilst it is covering quite a lot of ground, the rainfall core on this system here is still pretty defined, and it really is quite, it is still continuing to develop. Obviously, there's still rainfall out of this part of the convection here, which is outside of the radar coverage, but all things considered, it's not a massive tropical cyclone developing, and it is actually expected to get a little bit smaller in the way of area, so rainfall is going to be pretty concentrated depending on where this system can go. I definitely expect 150 millimeters for Darwin, and this is the part where I give my message as to what you need to do across the Northern Territory and Western Australia, and at this point in time, my message remains watch but don't panic. It's unnecessary to make preparations right now. On the Tiwi Islands, I definitely recommend preparing for some very significant rainfall accumulations. As mentioned, those falls between 400 to 500 millimeters are now possible. It's going to rain on the Tiwi Islands on and off for the remainder of today, and then it's going to rain from Thursday right through to about Sunday. Very typical monsoonal based pattern up there, but it's going to leave a lot of rainfall for a few spots in the Northern Territory. Just make sure you are tropical cyclone season ready. So make sure you've got your general preparations in place, and that basically means you've got your cyclone emergency kits up to date, and you are ready, generally speaking, for a tropical cyclone to come through on short notice. Trim up the garden, just make sure you've got your emergency plan in action as well. But at this point in time, it is most certainly overkill to begin preparations for a full-blown tropical cyclone. It's likely that we're going to see a tropical cyclone pass over at least someplace on the Northern Territory or WA coastline, but we just don't know where yet, and it's until then we really shouldn't be making full-blown preparations, because it could just be all for nothing. Now, the places that are likely to be impacted by this system, likely, not guaranteed, Columbaroo, Wyndham, Kununurra, Darwin, Bathurst on the Tiwi Islands, and then pretty much everywhere through this part of the Northern Territory here. A lot of remote Indigenous Indigenous communities up here, and they get badly impacted by tropical cyclones like this. So make sure you do spread the word in the top end of the Northern Territory. Definitely for the Northern Territory and the top end of Western Australia, and also Queensland by extent. Sometimes the only source of news that these people have is just word of mouth and from families. So sharing the information that we're presenting here and sharing official news reports as well is the best way to keep people informed and safe during an event like this. I'm going to watch this system develop very, very closely over the coming couple of days. We'll wait and see what is in store for this tropical cyclone in the future. It's definitely looking like an interesting one, that's for sure.